Good evening to you, Doctor. Tonight I'll be presenting my research about healing from trauma through dance. Emotional and psychological trauma is the result of extraordinarily stressful events that shatter victims' sense of security and makes them feel helpless in a dangerous world. My research problem. My personal experience with a traumatic event has brought emotional, psychological stress and trauma. To create a performance based on how trauma has affected me, I have to understand how trauma affects movements in dance so I can implement it in my piece. From my research problem, there are a few questions that I formulated to direct my literature review and research towards 1. How does trauma affect our movements when dancing? Number 2. What movements in dance withdraw trauma? Number 3. Last, what keeps audience connected and resonated when watching a dance performance which is demonstrating the trauma? Therefore, this study aims to understand movements in a dance that demonstrates trauma and withdraw from it, and from that findings to create a reenactment of my personal trauma as a dance performance. My main objectives for this research is to create a dance piece that is a reenactment of my traumatic event and recovery I had once experienced. Also, to develop social concern about trauma. Lastly, to understand movements in a dance that is associated with trauma and withdrawing from it. So, the importance and significance of study is this study will able to develop social awareness about trauma and facilitate healing through movements in dance. Going through trauma is no easy feat, and to bring forward this issue will open up audiences' perception to it and develop empathy. This study will also help in understanding the body and the effects it goes through in relation to post-traumatic events. Changes one goes through can prove hard and unfamiliar, and this creates dissonance towards their body when focusing on the pain and mental burden. With keeping the mind aware of dissonance that occurs, one gets to transfer their focus on the pain towards their body, hence overcoming the surge of anxiety, loss of breath, loss of focus on episodes that brings back traumatic memories. Hence, understanding the body and channeling it with movements and dance will aid victims to recover from it. Finally, my performance will reassure post-traumatic syndrome disorder victims that they are not alone, and that this dance performance will keep them rooted to the ground and work to overcome their trauma. Having to watch me as a performer and acknowledging that there are other people who has gone through a traumatic experience and survived it, they too will be assured that it can go away. Next, for methodology, I will do research on my study using qualitative research. The qualitative approach that I will use is practice-based research, or PBR. PBR is an original investigation undertaken in order to gain knowledge partly by means of practice and outcomes of that practice. The method that I will apply is practitioner model of creative cognition. This method allows me to engage in creative practice, in my case, dance, in order to explore my research question. What movements of dance can heal the effects of trauma? This research will not only contribute to my analysis of the dance movement involved, it will make good follow-ups of how my dance will turn out to be. The practitioner model of creative cognition starts with establishing the research problem, as stated just now, and followed by background research or literature review. Then, the next phase is to conduct empirical research. This phase is where PBR enters as stated by Skeins. The practitioner researcher designs a creative project that appeals to him or her in her particular art or genre, that will foster insights into process of composition, and that will permit a uniquely practice-based perspective on the question at hand. This will be the choreography of my performance, in which I will note journal findings while making the piece as a reflective documentation. While on this phase, I will continue on contextual research, allowing changes and confounds to shape my piece. Furthermore, the benefits of further engaging in new domain weigh far more heavily. The creative artifacts benefit from the practitioner's increased awareness of their chosen domain, and the critical examination benefits from serendipitous connections she or he can make while still engaged in the creative practice. This will lead to the last phase, which is forming argument and exegesis. Even though the primary phases, I will be engaged in argument formation for more thorough post-textual analysis of the choreography, and the exegesis draws upon relevant aspects of the primary and secondary research as required for specific arguments. Next, I will talk about site-specific performance as medium of performance. I will be delivering my performance through site-specific, as it enlightens and the engagement and the strength of impact of the audience better. This is one role of site-specific dance, is to promote modern dance that engages the community in an experiential way and can introduce dance in a holistic and humane way. This goal is not far-fetched. Through the ability of the dancers to express their genuine selves, those observing are likely to relate on an emotional and physical level. In tracking personal issues like trauma, getting the right tone while connecting with the audience will help in getting their interest and captivation, hence site-specific. Site-specific is not only an interesting way. I feel that site-specific dance takes audience on journeys, I'll say, whether they intended to explore it or not. It is also about learning to think through and within spaces produced for and by moving bodies, which demands particular attention to the effective qualities of these spaces, combined with a commitment of experimenting with different ways of becoming attuned to those qualities. Performance on stage creates a barrier between me and the audience. That's what I feel. In this situation of site-specific, it still has that barrier, but for me, I strongly feel that it's more penetrable. I feel that the audience and I are in the same space with me, and it's a feeling, so a feeling has to happen at that moment, and I feel that they can relate and feel me more. The issue that I have chosen can be an awareness of that it has happened before. We should feel responsible to understand about the issue, and main purpose of the performance is not only for entertainment. So what I'm doing is not for entertainment, I believe, like we used to feel if it was on stage. Yes, and the audience can actually feel that it is real. Moreover, challenges in Site Specific can make me grow as a dancer, I feel, and as a choreographer, and many more. But I personally feel that these challenges do not bring down a piece. Hence, it will enhance the piece in a different way. More literature review. Trauma leaves its effects on mind and body, where a person's body will unconsciously act in a way that resonates their trauma. And in this literature review, to deliver a strong and effective piece, I research into how trauma affect movements when dancing, what movements in dance can withdraw trauma, and what makes a dance piece that holds sensitive issue like trauma keep audience connected. So, from the conclusion, through my research in this literature review, I collected answers to my research problems. The research I did will be my guideline in creating my dance piece for my performance. The first question will be conveyed in the beginning of my piece. As a traumatized person, showing all kinds of effects of trauma. The trauma affects movements when dancing as trauma, showing all kinds of effects as trauma, initiates timid, limited movements, and victims are not comfortable with their bodies, and in need of desperate space to move around. In demonstrating trauma into dancing, repetitive actions and compulsive movements take place, acting as a double-edged sword where victims are self-assured but the movements are still destructive. In contrast, movements in dance that withdraw victims from trauma will act as a second and final stage to my performance, where I will convey a victim gradually healing and getting better from the trauma. My research informs that victims need to approach a more fluid and open movements, make large movements, and understand that blocking trauma just takes a lot of energy and doesn't work. Hence, victims must look into freedom of improvisation and in dancing and allow themselves to listen to their body rather than controlling it, and gradually overcoming the anxious and fear of it. Understanding their body and letting it flow with physical movements also helps victims get better. Victims can focus more on their bodies, and automatically their eyes will flow with movements of their bodies. And yes, and my third research question is what keeps audience connected and resonate when watching a dance performance demonstrating trauma will come in handy in how I convey these stages of my performance. Audience are more captivated, I think, and connected to the performance of dancers when elements of emotional contrast are applied. For example, a sad and stressing scene must be countered with a redemptive and accomplished scene, and vice versa. Making use of props that we see in everyday life keeps the piece rooted and are relatable, as it acts as an element for which audience has a sense of familiarity to. So, yeah, that would be it for my presentation, Doctor. Healing from trauma through dance. Thank you.